OWS fam, the nation, my dudes and dudettes, Hilow here, bringing you another installment of the 1 week season Best Ball Plus Industry Experts series. You know the drill by now. These are going to be released on YouTube every Friday. If you're interested in what you see here, head on over to oneweekseason.com, sign up for the Best Ball Plus product because we are doing this 5 times a week, Monday through Friday, 4 of which are available only to Best Ball Plus subscribers. You see it on the screen. You're going to see it in the thumbnail. Our guest this week is none other than Kevin Wheeler. He is a contributor at Fantasy Pros and GOAT District. He has been top 10 in rankings in accuracy on Fantasy Pros in back-to-back seasons, continues to own the rankings scene, and his rankings are currently housed over at the 33rd team. Kevin Wheeler, dude, how we doing today, man?
Doing great, man. Happy to be here.
Yeah, dude. Thank you for joining us. And this is going to be something we haven't really done this year so far. And we're going to really hammer down on your process when you're ranking, how you have been so successful at it in the past and achieved this level of continued success on player eval rankings over at Fantasy Pros, and dig into what that means for us with ADP kind of in this ever-changing kind of continuum of change for the rest of the season, or the rest of the summer, I should say. But with that, yeah, man, how you been? I haven't talked to you live since we did probably before last season when we did the GOAT
Wow.
District.
Yeah, I mean, doing well. Did well last season in best ball. Um, Working to get better. My the
Always.
season long and weekly rankings were a bit volatile this year. Did very well in the rest of season rankings, which is like during the season they have you rank each week based on
Yeah.
what the rest of the season, and the cumulative ended up number one, so I was pretty proud of that.
Yeah, no big
As far
deal.
as the weekly rankings though, man, they've gotten tough. They've gotten real tough. It's gotten real competitive out there, and it's like funny to hear when I get on a podcast or a YouTube, um like when people are like talking about how good I am or how successful I've been, and I'm sitting here like, oh, I just feel like defeated most of the time. It's so hard. Like there's so many people doing amazing things and really super accurate. I feel fortunate when I'm among the top 10.
Yeah, I mean, about 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was, you had back-to-back seasons in the top 10
Yeah.
for season long.
So one of those was like the draft rankings, like the preseason, like this is the
Yeah.
season long rankings, and the other one was like the weekly rankings where they culminate like each they take all the weekly rankings and rank them and total them up, and basically I squeezed into the top 10. Actually, I think I finished seventh on that one. So it was kind of the basically like the two different ways to rank. I was really hot for a couple of years there, and I would say those are probably the years I had the most time to really dive into the and organically create um projections.
Yeah.
Really, like when you're creating projections, if you don't have the most up to date information and consider things from every single angle, you're going to miss something. And I can honestly say I don't organically create my own projections from the start. Basically, the process is taken on a bit different form just for time constraints, if nothing else. Um,
Yeah.
but so to get into really the process, it's what I would do like in January when there's no ADP, there's really no other rankings out there. What I will do is I'll take every player's last 6 games, and just look at their last 6 games and what they did per game in the last 6 games. That's where I start. Um, then I reduce all their touchdown scoring in half, just because touchdown scoring is the most volatile part of doing rankings and projections.
Sure.
So so I'm not like the number I come up with in projections isn't really what I think they're going to score. It's kind of a way to rank them without volatility, if
Yeah.
it makes sense. Um, so then I will take that into draft rooms, and then based on early ADP, I will also adjust to come up with rankings. Um,
Okay.
so that's how I kind of do it preseason. And now, like now that ADP and so ADP, there's always been a misnomer about this too. And I wrote about this years ago. And now the website I published it on is defunct. But um, I was doing an article on reverse engineering your draft. Actually, Sean Siegel called it reverse engineering. I called it backward mapping because I'm a teacher and that's a technique. So I basically took
Yeah.
the draft and brought it forward. So, like this year in the BBM um, ADP, if you look towards the end of the draft, there's a plethora of tight ends and running backs there. So I know I can really hold off on drafting tight ends and running backs until those later rounds. So I'll scoop up. I'm really been, at least five wide receivers in the first 9 rounds, sometimes
Hmm.
6 and 10 or whatever, um, and just scooping up all of that because I know there's value at the other positions towards the end of the draft. Um, but so I will incorporate accurate ADP into rankings. What I mean by accurate ADP is not the draft room ADP you see in most formats. So I believe FFPC is this way, the BB10s, many other sites, the ADP that you see in a draft room is from February till now. The ADP you see in Underdog is like the past 3 days, 2 days,
48 hours. Yeah.
48 hours. So that's really accurate ADP. That is that is what people are thinking now. BBM is a little bit different format than you find in redraft, but there aren't many redraft leagues drafting right now. If they are, they're complete sharks, and it's a different set of ADP. So, like Fantasy Mojo has a great set of ADP. You got to pay for it, but it's not that much. If you're on FFPC regularly, you probably want Fantasy Mojo's ADP. And that's really whatever site you're going on. You don't want to use the ADP you see in the draft room. You want to find the most accurate ADP, the one that the ADP that's within the past week. You could even go back a week, or within the past 20 or 30 or 50 drafts would be optimal. Um, to find where players are actually being drafted right now. So I take that original projection score and compare it
Hmm.
to the accurate ADP. Now projections change over time too. This is why I don't dive too much into projections anymore, because when players change teams, when there's injuries, it really creates a different dynamic on each team. And so it's good to have that baseline number, but I really don't kind of keep up with it. I used to, like, years ago, I would do team by team projections where, target distribution and number of touches and what does this offensive coordinator do, and like what was their strength of schedule. I don't have time for that anymore. And
Yeah.
when you come up with your projections, even I think you do organic projections. How much different are they from other experts that are coming up with projections? So, like, I will definitely glance at other people's projections, reliable sources like um,
Yeah.
you. I'll definitely you for sure. Pat Carine,
Yeah.
Larky, um, Freeman. Oh, I forget his
Matt.
first name.
Matt Freeman.
There's Matt Friedman, and then there's
Oh, Friedman.
there's another one. Um, I wish I could think of his name. It's on the tip of my tongue. I'll probably think about it by then. But
Yeah.
he works for Run the Sims. Um, And he actually, I believe he might even be tweeting out his team level projections. He uh, years ago put out on Twitter a Google sheet that like really described how to create your own projections. And
Yeah.
man, it was just absolute money. Like it was perfect to be able to download these team projections. So like, yeah, I have that tool at my fingertips, still kept it, but like I just don't have time to do the amount of research that would go into really creating accurate projections. So I'll take a few, P. Howdy, Peter Howard. Um, I'll use his. A couple of people's different projections, kind of get an average of that, compare it to the ADP, and that's where you find the draft value. Take that into your draft room and scoop up all the value. That's kind of my process when it comes to whether it's rankings or drafting.
Okay. And then talking about your process versus an idea like range of outcomes, or, and this could be either season long or weekly because you are in the weekly
Mhm.
streets. Talk to me about how you utilize range of outcomes when you're putting together these, or I guess it would be more so an actionable piece post putting together projections, right?
Right, right. So preseason or the draft rankings is far different than the weekly rankings.
Hmm.
Weekly rankings, I look at matchups, and I've always found it kind of difficult to look at these matchups because each individual player has a different kind of matchup, and offenses have gotten better and more creative at hiding players from these tough matchups. Um, Jordan Vanek, you had on a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Holy cow, man. His stuff is fantastic. Like he really identifies what matchups are going to work against which teams. So like in the weekly rankings, I really want to pay attention to that. As far as the season long though, like the range of outcomes is highly touchdown dependent. Look
Hmm.
at Deontay Johnson. He was at the lowest end of his range of outcomes last year. If I actually have a note here on him, I think if he scored, I thought I had a note on him. Of course, I can't find it when I need it. I think if he had like four more touchdowns, like he had zero touchdowns. If he had
Yeah.
four touchdowns, like the traditional DJ Moore level of touchdowns, all of a sudden he's ahead of Jerry Judy and right up against shoot, I can't even remember who it was, but like he was 14, I think, in the rankings if you give him just four touchdowns. So like I got burned on that range of outcomes. Oh, and another one, little humble brag here, not so humble brag. Um, um, Christian Kirk.
Yeah.
I ranked him. So here we go. I actually like if I was going to do raw projections, I had him like projected in the top 12 receivers last year. I made the bold call on Fantasy Pros. They do a bold call articles. I'm like, Christian Kirk is in the top 12. That's my bold call. I
Hmm.
didn't do that on the rankings though, because when you're in this rankings competition, and even when you're in drafts, you don't want to overrank or overdraft a player when you can get other value before picking up that player, right? So I
Sure.
had I had Christian Kirk ranked. I looked at the other rankers and I'm like, who's the highest on him? I'm going to be one slot higher. So I think I had him ranked 24 last year. So I hit money on that just because, okay, his median projection probably had him right around wide receiver 36. And I think
Yeah.
that's right about where he was ranked by most of the rankers. But I honestly thought he was going to hit the highest end of projections because who else was going to get targets in that offense? And on top of that, Christian Kirk had been held back by the offense he was in and the target competition he had for the first 4 years of his career. Um, so yeah, so you have the whole idea of doing these rankings and being successful with the rankings is finding where your or where your higher outcomes, where your outliers lie, and making sure your outliers are higher than everybody else's outliers, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um,
So, what did that look like for your personal ownership levels on a guy like Christian Kirk, where you had well above consensus last season? Like, what did that look like from a portfolio management perspective?
so, like Todd Burrows says, you want to try to keep it right around 23%. I would have to look back. I should have looked back. I was probably in the mid 30s on him, low 30s. Um, I don't want to get too high on anybody because I'm wrong just as much as I'm right.
Hmm.
Um, just like everybody else is. So, I'm not going to I, I'm going to I'm not going to reach for him as far as the ADP. Let me correct that. I will reach as much as 2 rounds on a guy I truly believe in, but I'll do that more in my higher money drafts, and I'll
Yeah.
just kind of wait to see how far he falls in the lower volume drafts, if that makes sense. So yeah, in my higher money drafts, I'm sure I reached for him. Where I made my money last year was Philadelphia, just stacking Philly. Um, that's all I really care about last year. Like I took fourth in the NFFC
Yeah.
best ball tournament last year. So like, I mean, and if Hurt stayed healthy, I could have had that number one because I was the only one in the top 10 that had that Philly stack. Um, and the receivers still did great.
First of
But
all, how can you stack Philly with that sweatshirt on, dude?
it's all about the money,
I'm
baby.
just kidding.
It's whatever. This is a Christmas gift. I was born and raised in New York. Family is always getting me Yankees, Giants stuff, but fantasy football is starting to
It's about the
pay for it.
Benjamins,
It
dude.
doesn't pay the bills, but it pays for some fun, right? So like,
Yeah. So let me
yeah.
ask you this follow-on question. Have you identified a team this season where it's your 2023 Philadelphia Eagles?
So,
Like, is there a team that you're
yeah,
looking to
Cleveland,
stack? Cleveland?
Cleveland, Cleveland. Um, Deshaun Watson. Okay, last year at the end of the year, he looked like doo doo, right?
Yeah.
He didn't look like himself at all. Um, but if he gets back to form, and did anybody expect Jalen Hurts to have that last year? Jalen Hurts was going in the 7th round for the
Hmm.
most part. I think he climbed towards the end. You could even get him cheaper earlier. Um, this year, all the quarterbacks, or not, all the quarterbacks are valued higher than they were last year.
Sure. We're starting to see a little bit correction there in the
A
market.
little bit correction.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely not. And that's I'm starting actually to get more Herbert and Lawrence now.
Herbert's my dude.
Yeah, yeah, with Kellen Moore as the OC, and that's like when you're doing projections, you have to take that offensive coordinator into effect, right? You got to take that into account, and actually, that kind of diminishes Dallas and Dak, right? Like, so
Yes. Yes, it
yeah,
does.
like I like Dak, but I think I like Dak with Kellen more.
Yes.
I really like Herbert, and I don't affect ADP. Nobody listens to me. Um, yeah, I'm hoping he continues to fall a little bit more and a little bit more. But along with that, I was grabbing Lamar when he was in the 6th. Now he's in the 4th, sometimes the 3rd.
Yeah.
Yeah, but before Lamar signed, I was like, give me all the Baltimore because as soon as he signs, Baltimore's going to be too high priced. Um, so that's as we're drafting all winter, all spring and summer long.
Hmm.
That's what we're looking at, right? We're looking at that. How can I beat closing line ADP? I think as soon as we start to get reports from camp and see a few preseason games, Deshaun Watson starts to climb up. Maybe not ahead of Lawrence and Herbert. Maybe Fields falls, right? Like Fields is hyped up because of the DJ Moore thing. And
Yeah.
I love DJ Moore probably more than most people. And I will have to justify projecting him for more volume than most people do. Um, but so I'll go to tangent a little bit here. There's this whole thing about Chicago's offense, right? And low volume passing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what I want to look at closer is okay, Fields ran a lot, but how many of those were really designed? How many of those were pass plays? Let's differentiate there. And I think Ben Gretsch is doing a lot of that for Spike Week.
Yeah, so I'll jump in there real quick. I did a study for 33rd this season about the importance of touchdowns versus fantasy expectations at every major position. And basically, Fields had about 19 carries in the red zone that were designed runs last year. He scored 8 times on those 19 carries, and that is highly unsustainable. And yeah, it cannot be sustained.
Right.
When you look at a guy like Jalen Hurts, who had 44 red zone carries, and he actually has room to grow in his touchdown expectation, which a year ago was 11 on the ground. So yeah, it's apples to oranges. I will say I have been underweight Fields to this point because I identified him as somebody that is likely to fall as well. Currently, I'm sitting through 200, well, almost. I have another 150 slows going on, almost over 430 drafts. I have 5% Justin Fields because I would agree that he is likelier to fall in ADP where he is at right now.
Right. And I think I thought you were going to say 5 shares. I was like, ooh.
Oh, no, 5%.
5% is right though, right? Because you can correct that if he drops 3 rounds. And what I would say is this, like, you were right when it comes to the numbers, but okay, so what if he runs half of those times and throws to DJ Moore the other half, right? Because they were pass plays to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
DJ Moore's never been a touchdown scorer, but he's never had a quarterback either. Justin Fields gets sacked a ton. Let's turn half of those sacks into passing attempts. All of a sudden, the targets start to rise. I just think that that's what DJ Moore brings with him to the offense, rather than, this vacated target idea. That doesn't fly with me. And so targets are earned, right? Peter Howard was the one that kind of initiated that to me anyway. But I have this thought, and I'm not advanced enough to really process this, but I really feel as though your earned targets are equivalent to your first downs. And I know this kind of seems abstract, but like, if you get a first down, isn't a quarterback likely to come back to you on the next set of downs? And who's to say there's going to be another set, or it snowballs? But like, if we take the vacated targets, the true vacated targets that weren't first downs, the targets that are in an offense naturally, and the Chicago can't get any lower on their targets in theory. If we take whatever targets are vacated, give a portion of those to DJ, and then he takes with him his first downs or his first down percentage, like, what does his target volume look like then? And I feel like DJ Moore is that kind of guy that can get open right away and helps reduce the amount of sacks, because sacks are the major problem in that Chicago offense and for Justin Fields. So I just feel as though this offense looks completely different than what we saw last year. And that's like, I am high on Fields, but you're right. Like, the rate at which he was scoring rushing touchdowns is unsustainable, while Hertz's are, because Hertz's were from the 1 yard line and they got that rugby play. Right. That and they didn't outrule it. So he's going to get 10 touchdowns just from that play. Yeah. So where do we go from here? Watson was how this started. Yeah. Deshaun Watson. I think If he comes back to form, there's no reason he's not a top 5 quarterback, even top 3, depending on. I mean, it's hard to argue against Allen, Hurts, and Mahomes as your top 3. It's the battle for 4. Okay, Lamar's there. I could see Watson easily being as high as QB5. But yeah, there's an argument for Burrow and Fields and Herbert and Lawrence there too. So that is what I believe is pushing him down a little bit. And not only that, I can get Watson in the 8th. And actually, it's kind of flipped now. I think it's more Elijah Moore in the 9th and Njoku in the 10th, where it used to
Yeah,
be
it started.
it used to be
Yeah.
just the opposite of that, or you might miss on one of them. But I'm way overloaded on Amari Cooper too.
Yeah.
Um,
So my rankings, I have Amari Cooper as a tier 2 wide receiver. He's currently being drafted as a tier 3/4 wide receiver. I have him in my top 12 at the position. And that's been a stance I took at the beginning of draft season. And I've been working to not go absurdly overweight Amari Cooper. Because it would have been very, very easy to if I were simply drafting off of my rankings, my tiers. And that's an interesting theoretical concept about like how do we maximize um, exposure to players that we're overweight on. And something that we talked about this week at 1 week season was this idea of a weighted randomness within tiers as we start getting towards the end, the later stages of draft season where ADP is supposed to be more, I don't like saying this word optimal, but that's kind of what's thrown around the industry because I would argue, and the theoretics kind of back it up. We've talked about this at 1 week season, that ADP can never become truly optimal, even with all the data at the end of draft season. It just becomes more accurate. And if ADP is becoming more accurate towards the end of the season, optimally, we would want to bias our decisions to this idea of weighted randomness, which is utilizing tiers and then assigning expected or projected or desired ownership projection or ownership levels within that tier, and then legitimately running a random number generator to decide to make these decisions. What are your thoughts on that? Are you ever relinquishing control of these decisions to that effect?
that is mind blowing. Like I could barely follow what you. So I think that's what I do kind of
Just organically, just from
organically,
experience?
or
Yeah.
just like in the thought process. Like definitely, like yes, I do linear rankings, but in my head they're in
Yeah.
tiers, right? Like
Hmm.
and then like whenever anybody complains about linear rankings, I'm like, that's not what we're really doing. And you're right, there is a confidence level for each player within the tier. And that's basically what I'm doing. So, like, I would do more tiers, and then what is my confidence level? I'll bump him up to the top of this tier.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, if that's what you're talking about, then yeah, that's kind of organically happening in my process. Like, that's the thing about rankings is this too. You were going through each player and trying to determine, are they going to score one more touchdown than these 3 guys they're in
Yeah.
front of? Like, it's impossible. So like, it's your confidence level and how well they're going to score. Like, I would definitely have DJ Moore in another tier if I thought there was any chance he was actually going to get double-digit touchdowns. Could he? Sure. But he's never done it.
Yeah.
Last year was his first year over 5. Um,
He's kind of in that 4 to 6 sweet spot, right?
right, right. Um, but and trying, but yes. So within each tier, I think is more your tiers. Like they're the guys that are within 6 fantasy points of each other, pretty much.
Yeah.
And you're just determining your confidence level of how well they're going to score, or how productive the offense is going to be in general. Um,
So we talked a lot about these players in the early rounds, and if you think about the leeway that is in projections or rankings, you're gonna have higher leeway in the earlier rounds because these are all elite players. These are all players with elite ranges of outcomes. When we start talking about projecting or ranking or identifying the potential for late round breakouts, that's where you can make a solid bang across a portfolio in drafting or across your rankings against other people's. Have you started the process of identifying potential late round breakouts? And we'll classify late round as 12 to 18 or 12 to 20, dependent on format. Who are you targeting in that range?
So let me take a look at ADP right around 12.
Yeah, I'll pull it up
Um,
as well.
just and yeah, of course I am because I'm drafting, right? Like,
Yeah.
so I think guys like an Alec Pierce is undervalued.
Yeah. So we're kind of in this range. We'll go wide receivers. Make it easier.
There's if Hopkins doesn't go there, Tyquan Thornton could do something. Rashid Shaheed had a pretty good year last year, but Michael Thomas, I still think, saw him weightlifting the other day. I was in on him early, but
Yeah. Oh, he's squatting. He's squatting. He must be
he's
healthy.
squatting. Hey, all right. Hey,
Yeah. Looks good to me.
the annual Nick Chubb squat came out today.
Yeah.
Um,
This 1,100 pounds.
that it was, I think it was 610, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I
I think
thought he
he
did
hit
700 one
I
time.
think he hit 675 last season, something
Yeah,
like
it's
that.
just crazy.
Stupid.
And all I can think is stop, stop,
Your
stop,
ligaments in your joints,
just
bro.
stop. Yeah, high rep, lower weight. You're
Yeah.
fine. Um,
That's us old folk talking.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, I don't sit down too often because it really hurts to stand up.
Yeah. That gravity piece, man.
um, okay, so Tajay
Yeah.
Spears, Tennessee.
Okay. Go
Um,
running backs.
it, yeah, I'm just picking them off as I kind of see them.
Yeah.
Um, there, Derrick Henry's workload. It's hard to say that it needs to be reduced because he's just that guy, but he's getting older, right?
Yeah. How many seasons of 350 carries can the dude
Right,
get?
right. Like, I mean, he shocked me last year. I kind of faded him, and we talked about like the early round fades or like guys we're high on. Like, I faded Derrick Henry half a round or a round, right? Because he fading a first or second round pick is like, if I can get him
Yeah.
at the end of the second, I'm still grabbing him, and
Yeah.
that's
Again,
where he's going in
non-linear.
this draft.
Yeah. Range of
Right,
outcomes for sure.
right. Um, but Tajay Spears has that breakout potential. Like, the only thing holding him back are his knees, right? And
Yeah.
that's his knee concerns are more of a career long. If he's
Sure.
going to hit, he's going to hit now. Like, everybody compares his knee problems to Jay. I don't think they were identical, but if there was that same type of negative hype coming out of the draft, and
Yeah, that's an interesting comp. Yeah.
people faded him because of those knee issues. And while I don't think Tajay Spears reaches a second contract, I think he was faded in the NFL draft because of those concerns. So he could very well pick up 150 touches and get some of the higher value, the receptions. Um, and really, what you're betting when you're talking later round breakouts, you're really hoping for those last 6 weeks of the season. You're hoping for
Yep.
that Amon Ra, the Christian Watson. That's what you're hoping for. So, like, the first half of the season is something you're not even concerned about, or I'm not.
Yeah.
Um, when you're talking about these guys,
Yeah, I'd buy that for sure.
another running back that just screamed like, I cannot stop drafting Kenny Gainwell. I I don't think I I think Penny is a talented running back. I don't think he ever stayed healthy long enough to really produce. He has stints, but like, and Penny is going to make the team because he's not making a whole lot of money. Swift is going to be there, but have we been overhyped on Swift for years? Yes, maybe he performs, but does he fit the quarterback? Like, Jalen Hurts doesn't dump off. Is Swift going to be a between the tackles guy? And I think Kenny Gainwell is the most versatile back. I think he could be a 3-down back. I should look up his weight beforehand, but I know he can get receptions. I know he was their goal line back the year Miles Sanders didn't score any touchdowns.
Yeah, a couple years ago.
Yeah. So I've been really high on Kenny Gainwell, just because I think maybe not to start the season, but those last 8 weeks. And Kenny Gainwell's going in the 15th on underdog. Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
yes, all day. I don't even want to look at my ownership on him. It's sky high.
So I'm actually on the I'm on the Rashad Penny side of that, and I'm getting exposure to Gainwell. And one thing that I've really liked doing is taking two of those backs in Philly.
Makes
Penny
sense.
and Gainwell are the easiest to do that with, but I've also done some Swift Penny because the thinking there is if you look at the historical, and historical I mean like the last season production of the Philadelphia backfield as a whole, like what happens if it devolves into a two-headed attack instead of all three of those guys? Is Boston Scott going to step in and be this third down change of pace guy?
Only against the
Probably
Giants.
Probably not, unless it's they're up by 30 points type deal, which is kind of what he was doing last season as well. So yeah, if
Boston
that,
Scott only scores against the Giants.
yeah, exactly.
Like, seriously, he'll score 2 touchdowns every Giants game, but that'll be it.
Yeah. So if you look at that backfield, like there's so much value of that backfield as a whole. And now we're starting to see depressed pricing on them because it's a three-headed expected attack. It's like, what happens? You have DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny, who we know have extensive injury histories. Like, what happens when it's not a three-headed attack, right? There's a lot of upside, particularly with that late season that we were talking about earlier, in that entire backfield. So I will not argue that call one bit.
Yeah, I like pairing them too. Like, and that's something the Todd Burrows stack cuff, right? Like, there originally that was his idea, was like you get these two running backs that it should. You don't really want a three-headed backfield like that, but I like your philosophy of pick one of Swift or Penny and then back them up with a Gainwell, and you should have an RB1 most weeks for the season.
Yeah,
In theory,
exactly.
or at least an RB2 for most weeks of the season.
And the way I think the field looks at a situation like that, Miami's another good example, is shying away from the variance that's associated because the field is looking at the situation of the Philadelphia backfield, the Miami backfield as this binary situation. Like, I have to be right or wrong on Swift. I have to be right or wrong on Rashad Penny. It's like, no, you don't. Across your portfolio, you give zero shits who if you were right or wrong. But if you mix and match on particular rosters, you're saying on that roster, I am right on this situation. But that means zero across an entire portfolio when you can take a non-stance on the situation. But we know that the backfield as a whole has a ton of value. We don't care about player takes at that point. Particularly, Philadelphia's backfield outside of Swift is extremely affordable. Miami's backfield, extremely affordable.
My one concern about Miami is the rumors, and it looks. I thought I saw a couple tweets today that he's in Miami ready to sign Dalvin.
Yeah, and we saw multiple reports come out over the last 3 or 4 days that Dalvin basically has offers on the table. Multiple offers was the yesterday's news.
I definitely don't want him to go to Miami just to keep that backfield the way it is, so that I can continue to pick up two of them. but I'm like I've kind of backed off it just a little bit. I was going hard on what was the latest one, and
Jeff
that
Wilson.
Jeff Wilson. Yeah, I
Samesies.
before the NFL draft, I was A-Chain. And even right after the NFL draft, he was still going in like the 12th. A-Chain was still going in the 12th. So
Yeah.
as soon as A-Chain kind of broke that single digit, I backed off A-Chain and started scooping up all the Wilson who was going in the 15th, 16th.
Yeah.
Another backfield I like to do that with though is New Orleans. Give me Kendre Miller, and
Yes.
sometimes I'll pick up Jamal. I have very little Alvin Kamara, but I probably like. I'm not sure where he's going now. I don't really see.
He's going
him,
right
but
around 100. And the
still
big
too expensive for me. If he hits the 10th round, that's when I kind of like maybe it's time.
Yeah, that's what's been happening a lot in, at least on Underdog. You've seen you'll just get that draft lobby that has extreme biases. And it's like no one wants to touch this guy. So that's where I'll get my exposure is the 11th or the 9th, 10th round, late 9th. I've seen Kamara fall all the way to like 115 to 118 range. And that's where it's like, I don't care. I don't care if I'm wrong at that point. I want some exposure at that because we should expect, based on who they have on their roster, him still to hold this pass catching role if he plays. And when you're talking about, is this guy going to play or is he not going to play? We don't have to be right. We don't have to be looking to be right. We can be like, well, this roster will say he plays, and I'm getting him at a round and a half discount to his like worst ADP of the entire summer. As we inch closer and closer with no more news and no more news, I think there's two ways to think about it. The field is probably at some point going to have this tipping point where we continue to get no news with Kamara. ADP is going to correct. So, but where are we at that point yet? No. So I think he still has some room to fall. At the same time, like you mentioned, right now on paper, it's a 3-headed backfield. What if it's not? Like
Right.
Jamal Williams is there, Kendre Miller is there. And I didn't notice that, or I didn't attack that in full transparency at the beginning of draft season. This is probably over the previous 3 weeks or so where it's like you have that realization. It's like, we don't have to be right about the situation. We just want to place ourselves in order to capitalize on expected value. So yeah, I like that shout a lot as well.
Yeah. So in that same kind of mindset, like the late round stacks of the Giants receivers.
Yes.
The late round, there's also
You homer.
Not really, like honestly,
Just kidding.
for me to, well, I'm talking about they are priced correctly in the 16th,
Yes.
17th, 18th round.
Yeah.
Like totally anti-homer. And like that Giant stack is just so juicy.
So easy too.
Because you start with Waller, who's undervalued. Well, he's risen. He's been rising lately just because everybody's starting the articles. Evan Silva was talking about. I know Evan Silva was talking about Johnson, the tight end from New Orleans.
Yeah.
And comparing him to Darren Waller. But yeah, a lot of people have started talking about Darren Waller, and it's really easy to either in the next round or even now Daniel Jones is falling to kind of like that 10th round range. So you can easily Waller and Daniel Jones, and then you wait until the last 3 rounds and you get 2 of those other wide receivers. And like, I wouldn't go all 3.
Yeah.
And there's actually 4 guys there that you could draft. That's the thing. Like
Sterling Shepard, even you could add 5, maybe.
Yeah, Shep. Yeah. So the Giants homer in me loves Sterling Shepard.
Yeah,
he is just glass. He's not. He breaks way too easy. Like Coach Shepard. Woohoo! Keep him around. Like, actually, what I would say is like, ask him if he'll sit on the pup. Keep him on like a practice squad or whatever. Just keep him in case you're really good and a couple of guys go down. Like,
Yeah.
Keep him on that back burner. Maybe he's a playoff guy, but
So let's talk about that situation real quick.
sure.
Jalen Hyatt started around ADP 150, so 13th, 14th ish round. And he's been sliding off of these reports that he's not coachable or he's not picking up the playbook and OTAs. How have you been handling? Because in my mind, Jalen Hyatt and Darius Slayton are similar players. They are these speed guys. They are likely Z type wide receivers. They're not going to do much else. They're these safety manipulators, is how I've described it in the past. Are you now taking shots? How are you handling Hyatt versus Darius Slayton now that their ADPs are converging?
So I was totally off Hyatt until he started 15th, 16th. Like I think his ADP is 180 now exactly.
Yeah,
So in the past, he's 182. So on underdog. Um, so I have started my Jalen Hyatt purchasing lately, and only in the stack. I actually Paris Campbell has jumped ahead of him.
yeah,
Paris Campbell was going super late. I was buying him. I definitely like Slayton. I don't like Slayton. Daniel Jones likes Slayton. Daniel
yeah,
Jones has this connection with Slayton, and it's going to keep him on the team, and it's going to get him 4 to 5 touchdowns this year. Like Slayton is the cheap bot. Like he's your last round lock almost, especially if you get Daniel Jones, just grab Slayton in that 17th, 18th round, you're gold. Um,
yeah.
and
It's
then,
it's no secret that I've been targeting the Rams heavily, and we talk
mhm.
about correlation week 17. That has very naturally led to 25% Darius Slayton up to this point for
and
yours truly.
that was also what I was going to say is you could pick off a couple Rams guys late.
Yeah,
And and when I do underdog, I like trying to correlate with all three of the playoff weeks. I like do 17, 16, and then 50. So if I can correlate with all three, I try to. And in that you have New Orleans, the Rams, and the Giants all play each other. So if you stack
yeah,
those three, you've triple correlated. There's a couple other situations like that where there's like the 4 team correlation of the Patriots, Chargers, Broncos, and Bills, I think, or maybe it's Cincinnati, something like that. Um, whenever I start a draft, somebody comes available, I'm like, wait a second, there's some 4 team or 3 team grouping here I can play with a little bit. And yeah, so if you start the Giants or even if you wait for the Rams stack, throw in a Saint, throw in a Giant, they're all available, like just sitting there waiting for you to pick them off.
yeah, 100%. Let's transition the discussion now to some varying formats. So you're obviously very in tune with FFPC, which is tight end premium, and as well as Superflex. How does your process change when you're building rankings or when you're drafting in varying formats like that?
So, I mean, the super flex greatly adjusts the value of the quarterbacks. And so when I do rankings, I kind of keep each position separate.
Okay.
And then based on tiers, they kind of fall into linear, like full rankings. So basically, that those quarterback tiers jump way up in a super flex. But I also like to play the game of chicken. Um,
Now you're
I
speaking my language.
Yeah. So it so it depends. Like I have in a super flex, I actually have Watson in my first tier. So like the the Allen Hurts, Mahomes, Lamar, Burrow, Fields, Herbert, Lawrence, and Watson, I will forego any of the position players to get one of those quarterbacks. And I know you're probably sitting there like Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, yeah, because I think any of those 9 quarterbacks actually has the chance to be QB1.
Mhm.
Um, it gets slimmer the deeper you get. But really, those 9 quarterbacks are leaps and bounds ahead of the next tier. Um, you got Dak with a new OC. You got Tua with who knows what concussion issues could arise. And if you miss on that first round pick, you're dead. Like, so I would, and then again, like Dak and Tua and Daniel Jones and Cousins, they don't really have a chance to be a top 6 consistent, a guy that you want in your lineup as a top 6 quarterback.
Yeah.
Or their chances of doing that are lower. That yes, from week to week here and there, they might have 4 or 5 weeks in that top 5 quarterbacks, but over the length of the season, they're not going to compare with that top 9. So like, yeah, my tiers change as far as quarterbacks when you talk about the Superflex.
Yeah.
So if I can get one of those 9 quarterbacks, I'll go quarterback first round. Other than that, if there's something that falls in the 4th, 5th that has substantial value, say like Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, maybe Stafford in the 5th, Derek Carr. Actually, I got to move Derek Carr up a little bit. I think on New Orleans he has value. But other than that, like, I'll wait until 9th, 10th. I even just had one of the Chihuahua Superflex drafts on Underdog.
Yeah.
I think I got Deshaun or Trevor Lawrence in the 1st. I don't think I got another quarterback until like maybe Tannehill in the 11th, and then like backup quarterbacks like Trash and Trask.
That's Freudian.
That was total Freudian. Like, because I don't. Does Baker Mayfield make it the whole season? No, I'll take Trask for the last 8 weeks, 6 weeks. You know, like, so I'll play that game. And actually, Ryan Santos just posted a draft where he said he played chicken. So he got Kenny Pickett in the 5th, Kyler Murray in the beginning of the 7th, and then that's not chicken to me. Like
commit, son.
Yeah, I mean, but I won't go full blown chicken. Like, I want one quarterback that I know is good, but you're also dealing like in a best ball. If you stack enough receivers, especially good ones, your receivers could outscore your quarterbacks. Or even like if you go hyper fragile, robust RB along with one quarterback, that third running back could be your super flex. And there's only 2 receivers in those super flex leagues, right? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it's 2-2-2 and then flex.
2-2-2 in the flex. So your flex could be filled in by a receiver or a running back over your 3rd string quarterback. And if you're getting that 3rd quarterback in your first 8 rounds, you're kind of shooting yourself in your foot because you only starting 2 of them. So yeah, like definitely my 3rd quarterback is coming late. Like, and when in the last 2 rounds I can get Kyle Trask and Jared Stidham because I'm not too sold on Russell Wilson. Like, I think there's two outcomes that could come from Russell Wilson. Either Sean Payton brings him back and he's a rebirth of Drew Brees, which he was compared to when he first started. So that's a distinct possibility. I think that's within the 80th percentile of range of outcomes. But I still think there's 20% that says Jarrett Stidham could be what the hell is the fake tight end from New Orleans called? What's his
Taysom?
name? Taysom, yes. Jarrett Stidham could be the next Taysom Hill. Because
we saw glimpses. Yeah, we saw glimpses last season.
Right. So I don't know. Oh, yeah, I love to play chicken. Just because like every year the stat comes out, like last year 44 quarterbacks finished a week in the top 12 quarterbacks, or 46 of them or 42. Like, there's a lot more than just your starting quarterbacks that are actually going to show up week to week. And
Yeah.
if you're talking about a third quarterback in a best ball, you're really just shooting for the moon in the playoffs. So why not just make a backup quarterback your third quarterback?
I like that. Now, with tight end premium on FFPC, it really magnifies the distance between Travis Kelce and everybody else. Are you adjusting everyone else behind him, or are you kind of just letting the field overreact to that?
Yeah, generally speaking, like, I like Mark Andrews, but I'm not drafting him in the second round. I just can't do that. There's too many good running backs and receivers there.
Yeah.
And consistent. Like, the tight end position is volatile. Like, yes, Mark Andrews is that second guy that gets heavily targeted, but okay, they have a new offensive coordinator too, and they're going to pass more, but there is more target competition, and the offense looks to be opening up. So I don't necessarily see Mark Andrews' targets declining. I can't take him in the second. Now, Travis Kelce, I've been tempted to like take him 101
Yeah.
in a non-super flex tight end premium. Like, especially like if I'm playing a main event, I would seriously consider Travis Kelce at the 101. But then again, it did come out today. He is, I don't want to say whining about the money, but that's how I think the tweet made it look like he's whining
Yeah.
about the money, but he did complain about the money. He definitely deserves wide receiver money, right? Like, if he's being underpaid, then Kansas City needs to write a check and be like, hush.
Stop it.
Just here goes $5 million. Just, you're good. Yeah. So, but yeah, it moves Travis Kelce up. I would say if Mark Andrews, if you can guarantee me 17 games of Mark Andrews, I would be very tempted to draft him in the second. Beginning of the third, I'll take him. But really, I guess you could say Waller, it definitely helps because he should get the target volume. Hawkinson, there's too many other options. Like, it just, you have it, tight end premium gives you a premium for receptions. How many tight ends get those consistent heavy targets to make up for that, that alternate scoring, to really give them a bump. The thing about FFPC too is you only need 2 receivers, and then there's 2 flex. So yes, it does bump up the tight ends, but just not as drastically as I think most people consider that. And if you're talking best ball, yeah, I'm gonna put a third or fourth tight end. In fact, I'm in most formats, I'm grabbing a third tight end, mainly because of what I said earlier. Those last few rounds, 18, 19, 20, there's starting tight ends there. In fact, Dawson Knox has now dropped. Like, what are people thinking? Like,
Kincaid's a hell of a drug.
Yeah, apparently. I honestly, I think it's all Liam Murphy.
It's gotta be.
I really you can't deny that he's in like 50% of all drafts. So he could drive some 80-50. and like, he's a proven winner, right? He's won 3 major best ball tournaments. So like, there's no, and he's hilarious too, but like, he goes with his guts, and he's a Buffalo homer. But like, in all reality, Knox's snaps shouldn't really decline that much. Knox and Kincaid are playing 2 different positions, right? Like,
correct.
If you're high on Kincaid, if you think he's that high of value, then you automatically think he is in the slot,
exactly,
not lined up on the line. So why not stack? Well, you don't want to stack tight ends because you just don't want to overload on the same team of tight ends, but like, because it's a onesie position, right? But like, Dawson Knox going anywhere past the 12th round really is a value. Like I could see him slide in a tight end premium. Anything in the double digits becomes a value with Knox. Well, no, let's keep it at the 12th because Knox doesn't really benefit from that tight end premium, right?
Yeah.
He's a touchdown scorer. So, but like, yeah, any format where he's falling to the 15th round, like he becomes a value in the 12th, but really like let him fall to the 5th. It's like underdog. I feel like he's beyond the 15th round.
I've gotten some like 17th.
Yeah. Like I don't want to say last round, but man, it's getting really close to the last round sometimes where he's just sitting there. And actually, there are times where I'm like, no, I have a stack set up and Knox doesn't fit in. But
Yeah.
what, like, how do I? And like, I take him just because it's like the Dawson Knox value is more valuable than the stack at that point, anywhere after the 15th round. So, yeah. Where else? I go off on too many tangents.
No, I think that's probably going to do it for us too, dude. We
Wow.
we got to an hour without even realizing it. Wheeler, I appreciate you coming on again, man. Wheeler is routinely found in the high stakes scene. He is obviously had some. What's that?
I'm not really high stakes. I'm more high volume.
Gotcha.
I got to get my bankroll up for them high stakes. But
There you go.
I hang with the high stakes crowd.
There you go. There you go. And again, your continued success in rankings is admirable. And thank you for coming on and shooting it with me. Tell us real quick on the way out where we can find your work and where your Twitter handle is on the screen, but go ahead and shout that as well.
Thanks a lot for having me. I really appreciate it. You can find all my work really at the33rdteam.com. I think we said that a bunch, but yeah, and hopefully I'll be pumping something out soon. I'm way behind deadlines. But there should be something soon, whether it's dynasty rankings or best ball redraft or just some other focus. Probably like I've been working on dynasty for a while. So that's probably what'll be next. But really just follow me on Twitter at ff_Wheeler and you'll see what I'm pumping out there.
Again, man, thank you for joining us. This is Best Ball Plus from 1 Week Season. This is our Industry Experts series. Again, you can find we're doing this every single day, jumping into the heavy analytics and theoretics behind the game of best ball via our Best Ball Plus package. Head on over to oneweekseason.com and we will see you in the streets. We'll see you in the draft lobbies and we'll see you at the top of the leaderboards.